intellectual property. It's a very kind of complicated term that a lot of people get confused about because it relates to patents, trademarks, and copyrights, which are often used kind of interchangeably. Most of my work has to do with patents and trademarks on a daily basis, but once in a while, I do get, questions and work in copyright. So I'm really glad to be talking about copyright as it pertains to kind of arts and crafts and patterns today. I think I have a bit of a creative side. I try to keep that in my daily work practice. I actually, if you've ever seen a patent, there are usually technical illustrations as part of it. Mostly they're done on the computer now, but when I submit my patents, I like to hand draw them and then they get computerized later. So at least I get to do a little bit of drawing, which keeps my artistic interest alive in my daily work, which usually just involves a lot of writing and work on the computer. But today I'm going to talk about copyright, which pertains to mostly like artistic works, and so it falls nicely into kind of knitting and patterns. So although you might think like, can we get patent and trademarks? There may be a little bit of patent and trademark in what everyone does, but I would say for the most part, it pertains to copyright. So first of all, I hope that this doesn't become like a speech. I'm hoping that this is more of a discussion. So please, if you have any questions or comments while I'm speaking, please feel free to interrupt. I hear that there's a lot of use of certain websites that I'm not particularly familiar with, like Ravelry. And so I'm happy to answer like questions as they relate specifically to questions that you have relating to your crafting projects. I do know Etsy, and sometimes questions come up from clients about Etsy. I have worked with clients that do jewelry designs and things like that. So they're all kind of similar. They're all kind of in the kind of arts and crafts, but we'll talk about how knit patterns kind of is a specific, unique thing in the copyright realm. So I will kind of go through my handout, but feel free to kind of interrupt with like specific questions as I go along. And just as an incentive, so that I don't have to do all the speaking, I do have some giveaways. So if you do volunteer, I've got some wine tumblers, some reusable grocery bags, and some hand sanitizer for everyone. Okay, so just like everyone else during the pandemic, I was looking for some things to occupy my time. I would say I took up two kind of creative hobbies. One of them was making like miniature like doll houses, like little model houses. So I really enjoyed doing that. But the second one was I kind of took up knitting. My sister had knitted when we were growing up, but I never, it never caught on with me. But I did do some knitting, and just as proof, this is the best thing that I made during the pandemic, which was a hat. It took me, I think I restarted this one about like 10 times because I would say I have like a pretty big circumference of a head, and I kept on like kind of getting the diameter wrong. So I restarted this one a lot, but this one fits my head, so I'm happy about that.
That's great.
Okay, so just to talk generally about copyright. So copyright is the intellectual property construct that is going to protect original works of authorship that usually relates to kind of the arts. So we're talking about literary, musical, artistic works, things that you probably, have heard about copyright being associated with, such as, books, movies, songs, computer software, also like architecture blueprints was a big one, I think back in the day. So all of these things are protected by copyright. And you probably remember like putting in a VHS or DVD and there's always like a copyright notice. Books, you always have to be careful about the copyright. There's usually a page that includes like copyright notices. So all of those things are things that would be protected under copyright. And One thing that's particularly called out by the Copyright Office, and I should mention that I'll be talking mostly about US copyright law. I would say around the world, everyone has their own different rules, but they're generally the same. Although if you are, if you're curious about something specifically like in Canada, you might want to just double check. But I would say, I'm going to be talking about the US. So knit patterns and kits do fall under copyright protection. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Copyright does not protect facts, ideas, systems, methods of operation. So basically, if there's like an idea that you have, it's not going to be protected. And we'll talk about how that pertains specifically to like knitted products. So when you own a copyright, the owner has the exclusive right to make copies, sell or distribute those copies, make derivative works, and to display that work. So once you make something, you get a copyright, and then you have exclusive rights based upon that copyright. A copyright lasts for the life of the author plus an additional 70 years. The duration of copyright is very complicated. If you go on the internet and look it up, you'll see that it's changed many times. There are different rules during the span of time. A lot of this has to do, just kind of as a tidbit, is Mickey Mouse. So I think Steamboat Willie is coming up, is going to be in the public domain next year, but the copyright duration has changed over time because we really want to protect our Mickey Mouse. So that's why it's complicated and has changed over time. So now I'll try to talk a little bit more specifically on like the knitted patterns and products. So what is going to be copyrightable? So it's going to be unique and original combinations of knitting and crochet patterns and how they're applied to a particular product. And mainly when we're talking about knitting patterns, we're talking about the text instructions and the images that go along with it. So one thing that kind of I have an example of later is that just kind of like the step-by-step instructions alone is not going to be copyrightable. So that's kind of like an equivalent of a recipe. A recipe for, bread is not going to be copyrightable. What is going to be copyrightable is going to be the pattern, which includes the text and then the images. So we're talking about maybe photos or diagrams that go along with kind of like the step-by-step instructions. So when you have a copyright on a knitting pattern, you are able to control how that pattern is going to be distributed, who can sell it, where you can sell it, and for how long. So things that are not going to be copyrightable are things, one, that are in the public domain. So that means expired copyrights. I did look it up, and so if the copyright was published in 1927, it will expire this year. So if there are like really old knit patterns, pre-1927, you're probably okay, because it's probably in the public domain. Once it's in the public domain, it's free to use, nobody can own a copyright on it. What's also not going to be copyrightable are useful articles, and this is kind of a big category. So the knitted product is probably going to fall into this category. So we're talking about the clothing, the blankets, the pot holders, all of those things are categorized as useful articles, and those cannot be copyrighted. So what is copyrightable are going to be the patterns, the knit patterns that I just talked about. And also the building blocks of the stitch pattern. So kind of those instructions or recipes themselves also are not going to be copyrightable. So you might be wondering, how do I make sure that I have this copyright? So the copyright is going to exist automatically. The moment you create the work, the copyright exists. Maybe some of you have heard of this thing called poor man's copyright. So back in the day, for example, if you wrote this great manuscript, you would mail it to yourself to kind of show proof that, that it was done and this is like a copyright. We generally don't have that anymore. And the reason is because I think because a lot of things are done electronically, there is usually some record of when something has been created. But back in the day, you wouldn't know maybe the date. You couldn't prove the date or something when something was created. But nowadays, pretty much once you finish a knitted pattern, and then it's maybe published on a website that you use, that's going to in itself be a copyright that you can claim rights to. Copyright notice is something that used to be required and now is optional. So, probably most of you have seen kind of that little C in the circle, the year, and then the author. This is kind of just to put people on notice that you think that what you created has copyright. So if you're creating a knit pattern and you think it's valuable, I would put that notice on there just to alert people that you are claiming rights. An equivalent to this is you probably see it on most signs like McDonald's or any restaurant or store. You'll see a TM. That's the notice for trademarks. So all it does is it puts people on notice that you think that you have rights. It doesn't technically have any legal standing. It's just kind of like a notice function. And I think if the purpose is to kind of like prevent people from copying it, I think putting a copyright notice on things that you create is probably a best practice. And then if you would like to get a copyright registration, this is what's going to be needed if you ever want to enforce your copyright in court. So typically, if an issue comes up and it is so big that it's worth going to court about, you can always file a copyright registration later. And it's just that it takes time. It might take some time for it to get approved. But if it ever comes to that, you can always register it later. One thing that I usually do with clients is I'll have them register it when they're not going as far as to file a lawsuit, but if they want to send a cease and desist letter, sometimes having a copyright registration is kind of like something to just tell that person that we're serious, that we think we have copyrights. So that would be the only reason I would use a copyright registration is if there's some reason to enforce the copyright. Otherwise, I generally don't think it necessarily is needed until kind of an issue arises. But on the other hand, it is pretty easy and cheap to file a registration. So you just go onto the US Copyright Office. There is kind of like this form. I think you have to make an account. The current fee that I just looked up, because sometimes it changes, is $65 to file an application. Usually gets approved, I would say within a couple of months. So that's fairly quick, and it's not too hard to do. So you can hire me to do it for you, but I think you can probably figure it out yourself because it's just a basic form. So this is just kind of like a legal filing. Give your copyrights a number, some legal status. But most importantly, this is something that is more important when you get in an issue and there's a lawsuit. Yeah.
What's your hourly rate?
I'll tell you after. So the Copyright Office does have these categories of things that can be copyrighted. And so I put 3 down that kind of relate to knitting, the knitting world. So the first one is works of visual art. So this is where the patterns and the kits for sewing, knitting, crocheting, and needlework come into play. So when you file for a copyright registration, you do have to put what kind of work of art it is. So visual arts would be where the patterns and kits come in. And so there so if you were to file a registration, you do have to upload an example of your art. So if it's like a PDF of a pattern, you would submit that. So I think, and you guys can tell me more accurately, but I think for the patterns and kits for sewing, that's usually downloadable PDFs of patterns, and then maybe like a knit kit that you would pick up at like a store. Are there any other like categories of things that kind of fall into like what patterns would be besides like PDFs? I guess books about knitting. So there are two other categories that may apply. So there's sculptures. So sometimes knitted items can be artistic sculptures. I put there unique toys, stuffed animals, but mostly we're talking about like works of art that are made from knitting. So I just put an example of a knitted bicycle there. And then literary works are going to be books. So if you are publishing a book about knitting and includes patterns, the book is also going to be copyrightable. So I think everyone mostly has questions when they contact me is about, is this okay? You know, is there going to be like an infringement issue? So copyright infringement is when you're using someone's copyright. So they, first of all, they have to have copyrights. So, you know, you have to check, do they actually have a copyright? But if they do, they have control over how the pattern is distributed, who can sell it, where they can sell it, and for how long. So if you are using their pattern that goes against what they have given permission for, then there could be a copyright infringement issue. So an example of this is if you downloaded a pattern that you know that that person was selling, but you didn't really purchase it from them, you got it from some other website. So that could be a copyright infringement issue. Another example could be if you bought a pattern and then you made a bunch of copies for a whole bunch of people, or you re-uploaded it to your website. So that would be additional copying that may not have been part of the initial permission that you got when you bought that original pattern. Yeah?
So I have two questions, but they're kind of based on just like, I've seen these like online debates about things. One is, you know, a designer will publish a pattern and say, you know, do not sell the objects that you make from this pattern, but they don't have copyright over the thing that someone else makes, right? And so this is an argument I hear all the time is you can't tell people that they can't do that or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the other question I have is, you know, a lot of times I'll see like this just internet argument thing about like somebody will release like a raglan sweater with you know, a cable down the center front or whatever. And then someone else releases a raglan sweater with a cable down the center front. And it's different, but it's also like, come on, there's only so many sweaters like possible, you know?
There's
only so many different constructions. There's only so many colors someone could do, you know? There was like a little like cow neckerchief thing recently that everybody was flipping out because two designers had done like an orange neckerchief or something like that.
Yeah.
And they were just like, they did it in the same color on purpose, you know? And it's like, I mean, like there's only so many. So like, what's the, I don't know, like what, where does that?
I think those are really great questions. So I think where you kind of get into a discussion about our legal infringements, and then perhaps we would call maybe like ethical infringements. Like, you know, there's the law, there's the legal rule, but then there's also just like within each craft culture, there might be like unstated rules where you just like, you know, just you don't maybe ethically in your heart or whatever, you know, you just think like, okay, maybe that's not the best way to do it because the creator, you know, you want to respect the creator or something like that. So I think probably some of those discussions are getting into like a little bit of that. Like it might be legally okay or not okay, but then like ethically within, you know, the crafting community, maybe this is not okay or okay. I'll comment on kind of like the two scenarios you brought up, although I would say, just doing a little bit of like research in some of this, a lot of copyright is in a gray area. And I think, I'm just trying to think of a recent example that maybe you all heard of in the news. A lot of people are suing artists, or artists are suing people because of like taking segments of songs and like how much they can take. So a lot of this copyright stuff is in that gray area where it's not, it's not black and white. There's definitely like, there's could be debate on both sides. And I think one of the things is that because there's not a lot of big lawsuits in these areas, like, a copyright infringement lawsuit about knitting patterns is not going to go very far just because of the cost of lawsuits. So usually they're going to settle. So there's just like not a lot of like how we develop the laws, like case law, like history of like how judges have decided things. There just isn't that much. So that's why I think we're stuck in this area where like people don't really know the exact answer to things. But we kind of just try our best based upon each particular scenario. So I guess the first scenario, the first debate about like whether someone can sell things based upon a pattern. So I think my general thought on that is that they probably can't stop people from selling the product that they made based on a pattern legally. It's kind of like, the example that I think of is kind of like a recipe. You can't stop people from selling the pies. You've already benefited from selling the pattern, so you can't go the next step of preventing people from selling the thing that they made from the pattern. Does that make sense? I feel like I said a lot of words there. So I guess it would be hard for someone, I think, to actually file a lawsuit against people who were selling the thing from the pattern. The only possibility is if when you bought the pattern, you agreed that you wouldn't do that. So there's like maybe a box or something that you clicked and you said, I'm only gonna make one for my granddaughter, no more, or something like that. So unless there was like a contract agreement, that where you agreed to that, it doesn't seem like they would be able to. Yeah.
So if it's not in like a contract, but it is in their pattern, like under their copyright, and they say, this is only you can only create products for personal use and non-commercial use.
Yeah, so
that would fall into
I saw that coming up a lot, and I think I put it like under copyright infringement, disclaimers and notices for personal use only.
Oh.
So that's going to be tricky because contracts require an agreement. So it kind of is like, maybe you have heard of software agreements, click wrap agreements, where like everyone's just clicking a box and agreeing to all these things. There's a lot of like legal debate about whether those are legit or not. A notice like that is probably not an agreement. It would probably have to be something like a little click box or something. Notices like that, I would say in general, are more scare tactics than actually enforceable like statements. So there can always be, there's always can be kind of exceptions to that. But generally, when you see like for personal use only, what else have you seen? Like not for commercial sale or something.
Yeah.
So that might be maybe something more along the lines of like crossing like ethically, but legally, probably they can't come after you based upon that notice being on like a pattern.
So you don't have to read all 10 pages of the terms and conditions.
Do patterns come with that?
They do. Hopefully not notice.
I would love to know though, like kind of the process that some of you who do sell patterns like go in. Yeah, was there like a question or comment back there?
Yeah, I have written patterns, but not for sale. So if I were to put some language in there, like by purchase of this pattern, the buyer agrees that, Would that kind of language give me more protection?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably getting kind of like technical into like more contract law, but is that something that they agree upon before they purchase it, or they get
It
it?
would
And
have to be during the purchase project process.
yeah, so one of the things I guess that just comes to mind is, it would have to be something that they agree upon before, like getting the papers that have all the, like disclaimers and things.
It would have to be an online sale, not just putting
Yeah.
that on the copyright page.
Yeah, probably.
Thank you.
And then the second scenario that you mentioned. Oh, by the way, if you want to come up and first dibs on some of this stuff, and you had a question or comment, come on up, because there's only two wine tumblers there. So the other question was kind of goes along to, so the second bullet point, substantially similar. So that's kind of like the legal rule that we use in terms of copying. So a lot of people might think, I can copy a pattern. So again, we're talking about the pattern itself, the thing that's going to be copyrightable. You can maybe change a few stitches or use a different technique from like changing it from crochet to knit. So the test is substantially similar. So I think, changing a couple stitches is not going to be enough to take it out of infringement, but again, that's like a gray area. I think your question kind of goes along the lines of, is it unique and is it, what are the words I use? Unique and original. So I think a lot of patterns are probably going to fall in the lines of not probably being unique and original, and we're talking about the history of patterns, right? So you have to imagine if it had been done at any point in history, it may not be original enough. So if it's a simple thing, like you were kind of describing, like a stripe, that's going to be a pattern that's going to be hard to protect because it's probably not going to be considered unique and original. I just did in the Copyright Office is becoming a lot more nitpicky about this. I just did a copyright registration for jewelry, and it was for a jewelry designer who has a very established business, high-end jewelry. And they actually rejected the copyright because they didn't think that the design was original enough. From my eye, and I don't know anything about jewelry, I thought it was unique, enough for me. But the Copyright Office said no, there's not enough. Whatever they were looking for, yeah, maybe it was too simple in their mind or something like that. So that's going to be kind of maybe a harder thing to get over is the pattern even going to rise to the level of being unique and original? If it's something that's, something that could have existed sometime in the past, existed in some patterns back in history. So that's going to be another kind of hurdle if someone's trying to assert copyright rights to patterns that are like widely disseminated.
If a pattern maker says, this is an update of Vogue knitting, pattern 1940s, is that,
What does the update mean?
well, that they took it and made it more modern looking. They put more sizes in it. Maybe they made it more fashionable for today.
Maybe a different headline or something.
Yeah, different headline. So is that enough?
So my gut feeling, just kind of based upon how you described the differences, probably not. I think we're maybe getting into a little bit of the substantially similar analysis, which will depend on a lot of things. Sometimes it just depends on, are there a lot of patterns that are close to it? So I think things like hemlines, I don't think that would rise, but it kind of probably just depends on what else is out there and how close it is to other things to kind of like figure out whether something is substantially similar or not. But yeah, updates, that's a little tricky. And it also kind of plays into something called derivative works, which is a copyright owner has the right to derivative works. So it could be like if someone owned the original copyright and then you're doing like an update, that still could possibly infringe on the original copyright if it's considered a derivative work. That gets kind of technical. But yeah, my experience, at least just how the copyright is treating things now, is that the differences have to be pretty big step.
That's interesting. I got in touch with Westnitz because I wanted to use a technique and just get permission to incorporate it, because to me it was very unique. I had never seen this before and it was not written out. And they got back to me and said that that is widely established a knitting technique, and you might not be able to find anything how to execute that on the internet, but they said, you go ahead. So that was from that perspective, and everybody I think knows who Westnitz is, but that's how they're viewing it. It's like, you can't just take the words or whatever, but you go ahead because it's a technique.
Yeah, so I think that kind of maybe goes along with, what is copyrightable. Techniques are not probably going to be, I'm just trying to think of how a technique could be protected that could possibly go into patents, depending on how the technique is executed. It would require the technique to maybe use specific tools or machinery to perform this new technique. But yeah, so I think that kind of goes into this idea that the copyrights are not going to protect underlying ideas. And I think a lot of people, they want to protect like ideas, and unfortunately, intellectual property is just not a good vehicle for that. A lot of people come to me for patenting things, and the most common things are they're very surprised what is already out there. And so a lot of times what they come to me is not necessarily new. So I think you maybe would be surprised like what is actually not new. Because we're talking about any time in the past, had this thing been done before, made before. So that kind of maybe goes along with the technique too, especially something that seems new. There's just so much that's been done in the past, and today with the internet, we're just constantly searching old stuff for people, and then unfortunately telling them, sorry, the thing that you invented is not new, which is kind of sad.
So as a craft that's been around for centuries, is
Yeah.
anything copyrightable really?
Well, the pattern, if you have a pattern and you create your own diagrams and images along with it, the whole pattern can be.
Okay.
But I think maybe the thing to just keep in mind is that it's going to be narrow, right? Like the thing that you're actually getting protected is that pattern,
the
images and the text with the images. It's not going to be, like the
design.
idea of a new scarf, right? It's not going to be that broad. It's going to be narrower. Yeah.
It was once explained to me, and I don't know if this is correct legally or not, that I cannot patent an idea, but I can copyright the words I use to describe it.
Yeah, let me think of a good example. Do you have an idea? You can give me.
How to use your knitting needles to create a cable. If I tell you in my language, with my descriptions and my drawings, what it takes to do that, and I say, put the stitches on the cable needle, bring the cable needle to the front. I've seen that kind of language so very many times. But if I find a unique way to describe it,
A simpler way.
either a simpler way or a more elaborate use of flowery adjectives or whatever.
Yeah, so that's a really good example of not being able to protect the underlying idea. So you can't protect cabling, thank you. But you can't protect the expression of it. So if you were to write a pamphlet or a book with your drawings, photographs, and written explanation of it and how to do it, you could protect that. So that kind of maybe would fall in the category of like the printed books or published websites where you have writing. And that means that technically someone should not, copy and paste your writing and put it on their website.
Okay, so it would be like plagiarism for them to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, how about, a YouTube video, is that copyrightable?
Yeah. So, I guess, are people copying you? I guess if someone took part of your YouTube video and used it in their video, that would be an infringement.
Like, I know somebody who was writing a pattern that they were selling, and like for the charts of like the color work, like some of the stuff was like more of a well-known, or I guess it was unique to that one, but she's like, well, there's only so many repeats you can do, like something like that, because it's just part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, so is the uniqueness or being claimed kind of like the color combinations?
Oh, no, just like the general chart, you can do whatever color, like the pattern, I guess, the actual like design, I guess.
The design?
Yeah.
Yeah, so probably the design isn't going to be protectable unless it's displayed in some sort of visual that person created, and then if someone copied that visual.
Okay.
Yeah, they would do their own,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, in the back.
I have a question about, a number of years ago, I went to a yarn store and they had a little item that was knit, that was just the cutest thing ever. And I asked if I could have that pattern. It was in a book and they didn't sell the book anymore. And they didn't want to make a copy for me because of the copyright, and I get that. So I basically had to call around to find a shop that was still selling the book. So I have that question, is there any other recourse when you want a pattern, but somebody won't make a copy for you because of copyright? And then the second thing was a number of years later, it became a free pattern on Ravelry. I thought, so about the lines or something, after I went through all that work to find it a number of years ago and had to order it through the mail and everything. So those two things.
So that the initial person who didn't want to give you the copy, were they the author of that book?
No, they were the store owner.
Oh, and they didn't want to sell you the book either.
They didn't have a copy of the book. So basically, in that situation, it is up to the person who wants to make it to find the pattern themselves, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think, because then you said you found it like for free online.
Well, after I ended up calling around and buying the book, a number of years later, it became a free pattern. Yeah, so why would somebody change their mind about her? How does that part of it work?
Well, it's possible that the person who,
It was like a yarn company, it was like growing yarn.
uh-huh.
So it was part of a book service.
Yeah, so I think, from a publisher's point of view, I think, you sell the book, you make your sales from that book, and a specific maybe pattern within the book is not where they're making their money anyways, if they're not in the business of selling individual patterns, perhaps, I don't know. Yeah, and I think it's also just a matter of, I think if you are initially selling a book with like a pattern and it's a new book, you make your sales, and after a while, it kind of just becomes not, you're not selling books anymore. It kind of has run its course kind of thing. It kind of reminds me of, I don't know the exact details, but like when the cronut, so you can't copyright a recipe, and the guy who invented the cronut, I think he gave his recipe out on a newspaper, but he was still making money because he was like selling his own cookbook or something like that. So there's just like, I guess maybe different ways you can think about it when you can't protect it really. That's why I think people make books because it's not the recipes themselves they can't really sell. So they package it with nice photos and illustrations, and then we buy it, and so that's how they're able to I guess monetize on the recipes when they're not actually the recipes themselves are not copyrightable. They sell the books. So something along those lines. Yes.
Okay, so as we're in a library, it's a perfect place to ask the question. I go check out a knitting book. Can I legally photocopy a pattern out of it?
I think there's some rules about copying where you can copy. There's fair use basically, and so there's specific rules about copying. I don't think you can, and I forget if it's a percentage there's some amount where you can make copies, but you can't like copy the entire book. And it also depends on how you intend on using the copies. I would say if you check out a book and then you make a copy of one pattern, I think that's probably okay.
I mean, I know as a teacher, we were allowed to copy a chapter.
Yeah, so educational is one of the like fair use exceptions. So if you're doing it for educational use, it's a lot more. You can do a lot more if you're under like educational use. Fair use also is like the amount that you copy. I'm trying to think what other kind of exceptions. Educational use is usually the big one. There's other exceptions like parody, like things like that, like on SNL. So there are some exceptions. I would say, making a copy for personal use for yourself is probably okay.
They're probably not gonna come look for me.
No. Again, this is kind of a realm where the chances of someone coming after you is so low that I think you do the best you can.
Yeah.
But chances are, you're never probably going to be sued for making that copy. Where it would come into play, for example, is if you made a copy of every single page, bound it up, and started selling it in your little store or something like that, and then they found out about it, then that's like a bigger deal and maybe worth, first of all, a letter, but probably I don't even know if it would raise to the level of a lawsuit because lawsuits are so expensive. But maybe a book. Sometimes. Maybe a book publisher will care. Sometimes industries, they go into these kind of waves of interest. So for example, music, like illegal downloading, that was a big one for a while. I know architectural blueprints used to be one that got enforced a lot. What's one now? Yeah. Something like that, or
Streaming, movie streaming,
Fiction.
movie streaming.
but it's kind of like industries will do it just to kind of like crack down and make sure people know that there are some rules in place. But the one that right now that I know kind of has been sometimes has waves are like stock photo companies, use of stock photos. So sometimes they get in, I'll have like a wave of clients that have gotten a letter about a stock photo that they've used. Typically these things get settled, but they might hire a team of lawyers to just send out a bunch of cease and desist letters about stock photos or something like that. So sometimes they go in waves, but normally these things because they're just like, there's small amount of money is usually involved. It just doesn't end up like a big lawsuit, typically. Yes.
Okay, is there a way, where does this fall with copyright? You go in the yarn store and you see the sample and you ask for the pattern and they say, no, but it's free with the yarn purchase.
That's just their policy.
So I can answer that.
Yeah.
When a store offers a free pattern, it's probably because they have permission to do that. And most, at least I do. So for example, like Barocco gives me a list of patterns. If I buy so much yarn from them, I now have like use or code or something that allows me to give that pattern away for free with yarn purchase.
Yeah, and that brings up a really good point that you can do anything as long as you have permission from the copyright owner. So that just reminded me of one that I think maybe, I don't know if it was in the 90s, but like if you played the radio or like music in a restaurant or like a business establishment, you could get like sued for copyright infringement because you're not supposed to be playing certain music in like a business setting without permission or having some certain business rights to play certain music. So as long as a business you kind of just are aware of what permission you might need, because typically if you're a business, it's commercial, and so people might just care more than like one person who's doing something. So just be, I guess, aware. Yeah.
I think a good example is when the Happy Birthday song, they started enforcing that copyright, and all these businesses had to make up their own Happy Birthday song. I think that was the 90s.
Well, I have a question about, so, a lot of people are publishing patterns, but there are a few people who are wildly successful. And so, like, one pattern I can think of is like The Weekender. Everyone knows The Weekender by Andrea Mowry. Everybody knows Ranunculus by Midori Hirose. So is there a point where a pattern becomes sort of like so iconic that it would become like impossible for someone? I mean, I guess, there's always like the ethical thing, right? Where it's like if you tried to copy a very famous pattern, you would just look really stupid, I think.
How do you know it's her pattern? Does the person use like specific graphics, or just the way that it's presented is like, it's that person's?
Yeah, like because it's like they've become like certain patterns, it's like thousands of people have made them. If you look at the sales on Ravelry, it's like, yeah, I looked up one once and I was like, Andrea Mowry made $65,000 from this one pattern, and I was just like, that's amazing. Like, that's one pattern in her repertoire, and by now it's probably like $95,000.
Well, it sounds like this person was able to kind of create a brand behind the patterns. And once you have a brand, then actually you're getting into a little bit of trademark. What does she sell? She sells it under her name or another name? Yeah. So probably her strongest asset at this point is her trademark. So her name, or however she sells the patterns under that name, now has trademark protection. So basically, if anyone like tries to pretend to be her, uses that name, that would be a trademark infringement. And then I would just say, if there's something unique about the way she presents her patterns and she keeps on copying it so that people really recognize it, that's really good trademark protection. But I guess, so I guess if you are really successful, then you're kind of getting into a trademark branding sort of thing.
Has there ever been any big lawsuit in knitting about the patterns and the copyright?
I'm not aware of a big lawsuit relating to knitting, but so the worst, okay, I mean, obviously a lawsuit is possible, but maybe the worst thing that can happen is that you receive a cease and desist letter. Has anyone received one? Okay. The lawyer in the group has.
I know people who have.
And it's scary but I've seen so many now, I've become a little bit like not as scared by them for the client, but it's scary. But for the most part, what it is just, it's a notice and then usually you resolve it. So, you know, a lot of times when it comes to these things, it's just to have that person stop doing what they're doing rather than like money damages. So if you make a mistake and you copied a pattern and put it on your website, they'll tell you to take it down. You'll take it down, you comply, and then, hopefully that will resolve it. But that's kind of in I guess in the real world, like kind of how things shake out. Yes.
If somebody closes another pattern, and then they're gonna copyright their own pattern, then they need to get permission from the person they quoted?
Quoting a pattern means like,
Well, let's say, use this stretchy bind off, and then, invented by blah, blah, blah.
That's a technique.
a technique. Yeah. So mentioning something like that is not going to be protectable by that person. So you can reference that. That doesn't sound like that's something that would be an issue. If you say, use this bind off that this person used in this YouTube video or something like that. Is that what you mean, kind of like a reference?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably fine. They can't come after you for mentioning them or their technique. Perhaps that person might not like it, right? You mentioned their name. I don't know how it works, but maybe they're okay with it because it brings people to their side. If you link it, kind of a good practice usually in copyright stuff is to always provide credit to the person who created it, perhaps link to their source, their website. That always, at the end of the day, I think people, they want their stuff out there. So if it maybe just increases their audience, that usually is fine. I guess, if you want to just like avoid an issue, you can always reach out ahead of time. Otherwise, just kind of think about how how that person might feel having their stuff cited. But usually if it's in a positive light, you're not like, oh, this name pattern sucks or something. Like usually I don't think there would be, the chances of an issue probably are low. But yeah, it's possible. People are human, so you never know how they react. But I think as long as you're doing your best to kind of like, in my industry, like reduce the risk as much as possible. Okay, so I think I pretty much covered, my sheets, and it's like really good, I guess like real life discussion about like how this stuff applies. If you, had a question or comment, please feel free to grab some stuff, and then there's some extras. I'm sure there'll be some hand sanitizer available. But I'll stick around for a little bit if you have any other questions. But thank you so much for having me. I really feel like I'm learning a lot about how patterns are sold and exchanged on the internet. It's like the wild, wild west. Nobody really knows what to do when it comes to YouTube and photos and websites and all of that. So a lot of times I think you just kind of avoid an issue by just not doing anything that would like upset, the creator. And I think that's the best way to go. So thank you.
Thank you. Show and tell.
All right, quick show and tell. So the first person I have on my list is Rosemary. I promised I would hold it when she talked.
So the backstory is, my maiden name is Zimmerman with 2 N's. Anybody know somebody else with 2 N's? I never knew Elizabeth Zimmerman. even though her daughter married somebody from Marshall, Wisconsin, which is where I lived for 15 years. No, really, did that. I am at the South here in Madison, just wandering through and see my maiden name on a book. And then, and this is before the internet is as wild as it is now, but I gradually track her down. And then I even see Scully because the knitting group who held the knitting at the baseball park, he actually got to throw the baseball out one year. So that's when I got to walk up to him and say, are we related? We're not. So I've always wanted to try one of her patterns. Trust me, I'll make another one, but it is simple once I'm done. But it is interesting. I've been to YouTube twice, even tonight, because people in my knitting group, none of us could figure out how this was going to go together from this heap of yarn in the middle. But what's out there is the baby surprise dance. And she shows you how to lay it on the table and pick it up. Because all the way through, I kept trying to have the seam come underneath and it comes across the top. Who would have thought of that? Elizabeth Zimmerman, right? So I tried to make it out of her own book. It made no sense. In fact, I had put the needles down and then I was in Grafton and there were 4 ladies knitting next to each other. So of course I went over and talked to them. And one is the teacher for the Grafton store up there. And she says, well, you've been to Schoolhouse Press. I was thinking Schoolhouse Press before Scully took over. And I'm looking for a YouTube or something to show me. She says, oh no, it's a digital thing. You put in what pattern you want and he puts it out and sends it to you as a computer line by line pattern. So on here I say I use Elizabeth Zimmerman's Scully pattern. So it's gone through several levels of copyright at this point. So yes, where did I find the pattern? Through the help of knitters at a Grafton Collectivo store, at Schoolhouse Press. And what yarn did I use? I had bought it at the Knitting Nook, Hotcakes, Plymouth yarn, 75% acrylic and 25% wool. And if you've not felt that yarn recently, come up and feel it. It's extremely soft and nice for the baby. So this will go to the Knitting Guild in September for the baby shower. Yes.
Next up is Mary Pat.
Hello. I like to play with yarn and needles, and I had a couple patterns published over the years. And I actually had one put out with Sock Madness. Does anybody know what that group is? Okay, a lot of crazy people knit lots of socks over a couple months period of time, and so that design popped up in there. Well, anyway, I like things that are knit with different constructions, not traditional. And I look for things I've never done before. And a couple of years ago, I just started making circles. And I think you can kind of see the circle here. And it got kind of large, and I had 2 of these, and for 2 years they just sat there, and then I decided I'm going to make this smaller and make a glove out of it. So this is with the Shopple yarns, where they have a gradient change and 2 strands run together and they're changing colors as they go. So this was a pretty fantastic yarn to do this with. And then what I did is I added short rows down at this level here, and then I played around with some bind offs to pull it all together. And then I ran out of yarn, so I changed my fingers a little bit with the colors, but it worked out really nice. They look quite large, but they fit nice. Some people sitting at my table tonight really liked how the fit was on them. So this is my kind of the mock pair that I did. And
And I didn't really write anything down with these, so I had to kind of go back. And these are the ones that I'm putting together as a pattern that I'm in the process of getting ready to do a test for. So this is a fiber seed sock yarn that I came in contact with when I was in Florida at one point. And I used this, and then so I just kind of played with this. And I'm using Felici yarn right now for a smaller size of these. So in September, I hope to have a test ready, and maybe I can get a couple people that are interested. I would like you to have some experience doing short rows, because I don't get all the instructions are there, but I don't teach people how to do that. And people that aren't afraid to give really good, clear, constructive criticism and suggestions, and I work through Google Docs for that, so you have to have a little awareness. So I'm working on getting that pattern all set up, and around September 1st, I'll probably try to get a group of maybe like 3-4 different people to do that. I have one person right now, so I'm looking for others. So thank you very much.
Mary Pat, have you published other patterns?
I have,
I did a pattern called Shredded. That was my first one. A friend, I had never any interest in doing publication, but I made a pair of socks, and lots of people were just saying, those are so cool, those are so cool, those are so cool. So, and they had like little bikes on the bottom. It was kind of shredded is a term that you use to kind of go down the mountain trails and stuff, that you screen that out. And I made them for a nephew, and they had like a bike on the bottom of the foot. And I did also some little alien type head socks for kids. I did that one. And I did a pair of different jacquard type stitches. That's the one that I got into the Sock Madness competition. And I think I've done one other one too. I'm kind of on the spot right now. And then these, I think I'm going to do them something about spinning in circles or something for a name, but something to that effect.
Where are your patterns published?
They're all on Ravelry.
On Ravelry.
Mine are free downloads, and I tried to use all the practices that we're supposed to do and give credit. Even with the YouTube links that I put in, at the back I do have a glossary, and I put the person's name in their link. I don't contact everybody, but I do get in touch with people if I'm going to do something pretty that I think is unique and how they carried it out. And then it doesn't ever apply to anything that I do, but it like turned the wheels going in my head. So I do make contact with those people, and I let them know that I publish. It's just a kind of a network courtesy that I just think is a nice thing to do, to keep building and the sharing that we all do. Ravelry, I do the free patterns because I've gotten so much for them. I only knew how to knit and purl as a kid. And when I picked up near my retirement, I remembered everything. So, but I didn't know how to do anything else. So the knitting community out there in the internet really helped me.
That's awesome. And what's your name on Ravelry so we can find you?
It's the word bike, BIKE, and WI, Bike Wisconsin.
Nice.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The last person is Mary Sherwood. Mary is the thing to Rosemary, Mary Pat, Mary Sherwood.
Yeah.
So the shawl I'm wearing is the Some Me Time by Johi Locatelli. And I used Madeline Tosh Merino Light. It's kind of my favorite yarn. Johi, I don't know if you know her. If you're on Ravelry, I'd be surprised if you didn't know her. But every fall she has a fall knit-along. And there are many, 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 many people that join it. And there's a lot of conversation online, and her patterns are really nice to do. She pretty much writes them all out. She is not is she Brazilian? Argentinian, that's right. And so her patterns are kind of unique in terms of what I'm used to. She writes them all out pretty much, and then has you just keep repeating them, kind of. I mean, she makes wonderful projects. And I love this shawl because it's lightweight, but it's very cozy. And I don't know what else I can tell you about it, other than her fall cal will be coming up.
Okay, so you guys have seen me handing out some gift cards to our show and tellers. We have 4 of them. So the last one will be going to one of our guests tonight. I have my wheel of names with all of our guest names on there. And so we're going to give it a spin. And we have 13 guests tonight, so your odds are not quite as good as some other nights, but I'm glad you're here. I'm spinning, and there is, oh, it was a close one. Kim O.
Hey, Kim.
Get a $25 knitting gift card.
Thank you.
All right. Put my pattern away and pull up my agenda.
Lauren, do you want the podium?
Sure.
Might
I just
be.
didn't want to have to move your camera around.
No, I can move things.
We can move the podium out of them.
Oh, wherever. She's good.
Oh, here. A touch finicky. All righty. Glad the microphone is working tonight. Last month I had to use my shouty voice. So, okay. So we are officially calling our meeting to order, and that means that we have to get approval for the June minutes. Did everyone receive the minutes? Who's a member? Read the minutes. Excellent. All right. So do we have a motion to approve? Remember to say your first and last name so that our secretary can put that in our meeting notes too. So
Molly Bazier, I move the minutes be approved as published.
thank you, Molly. And a second.
Child second.
Thank you, Mary. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, fantastic. So that has been done. And that means that we're going to move on to committee reports. So Treasury, have a Treasury report.
The balance in our checking account as of July 1st is $10,013.89. And that's after several membership deposits and paying for a few supplies.
Thank you. All right, charity, our current chairs are not here, but we are doing our election tonight, so we'll have some new charity chairs hopefully. And I don't think there's much to report aside from keep knitting for the baby shower in September. Keep knitting for MPS winter wear if you want to, and Pathfinders, and yeah, keep that up. Membership.
Can I just make a comment, since we have 13 new members, why don't you explain a little bit about the baby shower?
Yes.
So we do have 13 guests. So our annual baby shower happens in September. You knit baby stuff, and a charity organization called the Christ Child Society puts them into a layette for families who need baby stuff. So they put them in with some baby blankets and other kind of necessities for babies. And that is something that we've been doing for, I think, many years now. So it's a great thing to do. All right.
Okay, we
membership.
Membership, yes.
Okay, so we have 48 members in attendance tonight. And as you stated, we have 13 guests. And then I just want to let you all know, I crunched the numbers, ha ha ha. We had 46 new members in the 22-23 membership year. Wow. As opposed to 16 in the 21-22. So.
That's amazing. Thank you guys for getting it out. Thanks for bringing new people in. This is so great. I love to see our numbers growing. All right, thank you, Mary. All right, program, anything new in the program that we need to know about? Next month, we're doing our barbecue.
So next month is the picnic. It's the first time we're doing it. It is going to be Cream City Yard. I have 2 sign-up sheets in back, and I just want to make sure that there's going to be enough people that are interested, because there's a lot of pre-work to do it, and if people really aren't interested in doing it, then we'll just come back and just have a meeting here. So there's 2 sign-up sheets in back. One is an RSVP that you're coming, please sign that. And then there's another one for a dish to pass. If someone's not here and they can read the newsletter minutes, they can RSVP me on my personal email, and then I'll put that down.
Is that in place of this meeting?
Yes, it's the same night.
Okay.
Yes, it's just in a different location because it's something kind of extra special. We
Yes.
have
So we're
a
having
yard
a-
dyer coming out
We're having
for that
a-
meeting, so we need some outside space. Sorry, Mary.
It will be Tuesday, August 8th. Okay, our normal meeting.
Our normal meeting night, it'll just be at Cream City Yard parking lot. Thank you, Nicole, for letting us do that.
When do you need to know?
If you can sign up tonight, that would be great. The sooner I know, the sooner I'll be able to say, yeah, we're gonna do that. And if you're not gonna do it, we'll put a notice on Facebook that you're just coming back here. And I'll work with Jackie, we'll send out an email as well, just confirming where it is. So then September is our baby shower. October, we have mosaic knitting with Sean. Is Sean here tonight?
No, Sean's up in
Okay. November is
Washington Island.
brown bag. We'll still do the brown bag unless I hear that people are not interested anymore. And then we're having a program with Aaron and Holly. Aaron and Holly again? They're not here tonight either. I don't know what they're doing yet, but they'll let me know. And then December, obviously, is the holiday party again. We also are going to put out a survey so that we have an idea of what you liked this year, what you didn't like, not just in programs, but events and other things that were happening. We'll have that for you for the next meeting as a hard copy, and then I'll work with Jackie. Can I work with you to put it in the newsletter, I think, and then.
Can we do it as a Google form again, like we did last year?
We can.
Okay. And then that link can go in the newsletter?
Yes, yep, whatever's the easiest, yep. And so we want to have we'll pass them out in September. We'd like to have them back in October. They have a month to just, it'll be a simple survey. So just go through kind of what programs you like, what events you like, what you'd like to see in the future. And that'll help us build going forward what we're doing. And then we are going to do a knit along, and I'm going to let Kelly talk about it more at Pathfinders. And just for that, I know we have a lot of yarn that Jenna has, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you bring yarn back, Jenna keeps that along with needles and everything else. We take that to Pathfinders. They're asking for us to help some of the kids knit. They're really interested in learning how to knit themselves. So it's not your typical knit along. It'd be more of helping kids learn how to knit stuff. We're gonna look at putting kits together with some of that yarn. So print out an easy pattern for a scarf or a hat or something. Find the needles, find the yarn, put it all together so that they have everything since they're so new. And then we'll have extra yarn if they want to make something beyond that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure. Sure. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Yep.
All right, and Kelly, can you talk about events?
Thursday, July 27th, we'll have the social knitting at the I'm not sure how to say it, Botanical Gardens. And that'll be at about 6:15, and I'll get somebody has suggested helium balloon, which I think is a good idea. I'll try for blue. I'll put it on the Facebook thing, ahead of time. And then, yeah, I think there's somebody who's gonna be taking over education. I don't know if I'm doing it or dealing with it, so, yeah, we can email Pathfinders and see when they normally have stuff, when they wanna do it.
Yeah,
that
that'd be
kind of
great.
stuff.
Yeah, and just keep us kind of apprised.
Yeah, so maybe in August or September.
Fantastic. Mary?
Nellie, do we need to bring our own chairs to the botanical?
I think, yes, yep.
Why is
Oh,
yours?
for the picnic as well.
Okay.
So for the
If anyone has
For the picnic,
camp
you
chairs.
do it as well, your own chairs, and if you have like little tables that you want to set, because there will not be like this kind of table chair setup, we just don't have that.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. We should probably put that in the newsletter too. Make sure that everyone remembers. All right, fantastic. Publicity newsletter. Anything to share?
Erica and I met last month about handling the transition, and we're going to talk again tonight. And September she'll be on board.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, State Fair. Anything we need to know for State Fair? I know we have knitting coming up.
Maybe she's, oh, KG's not State Fair.
Oh, Karen. Sorry, Karen. Never mind. Sorry. Karen is not here tonight?
No.
Okay, so be prepared to get in contact with Karen if you are interested in doing State Fair knitting. It is a good time. So email her and let her know if you would like to do that. Give her a date and the kind of time frame.
Lauren, I know we did it last year and it was really fun. Is there a way that maybe we could get the sign up for that somewhere where, like on Facebook or something where people would know about it?
Yeah, I can set up a Google form and people can
Yeah,
fill it
that
out
might
way.
be good. Yeah.
Yes.
I believe it's too late for this year because we have to communicate with the fair organizers and they provide the tickets and the parking passes and mail them to us.
Yeah, she usually does that and she's just not here tonight to.
Right, but just so you know, you shouldn't really be
Or
going
did
and
she?
asking for people at this point.
Oh, no, that's what I'm saying. With her not being here, I wasn't sure.
Oh, I thought you were gonna put it on Facebook.
No, that's why I was asking.
Oh, okay.
So for next year, that's a good idea.
Yeah, in the future. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay, all right, and, oh, yes, one more question.
If you want to know, several members got ribbons at the state fair.
Yes.
And to find out, you would go to the Wisconsin State Fair competitions, and they list under the textile and the craft, the knitting and the crocheting, the weaving, and that you could publish in the.
Oh, that'd be a great
They always-
newsletter article.
Yeah, they always do that.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we recognize those people in September.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and we always acknowledge the winners, the
Yep.
first place winners, and yeah, I think we usually mention those who have ribbons. So, excellent. Website. Our website chair here. No Karen tonight. Okay, that's a bummer because I know that they did meet a couple days ago, yesterday, something in that time. So they do have an update for us, but alas, our website committee is not here. So, is there anybody who is on the website committee who would be able to give an update, even though their chairperson is not here? Yes.
We were supposed to meet and there was a blip in the meeting, so agreed to meet tonight before the meeting, but Karen is not here, something came up, so.
Okay.
There's been no real progress.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting us know. All right, thank you. Okay, that pushes us into old business. Anything that we might have talked about last month's meeting that needs to be re-brought up? I don't have anything in my agenda because nothing seemed like we really need to circle back to this. There was some discussion about handling our treasury, but we decided to table that until our new board has been elected, so we can discuss that in old business maybe in September. Anything else that y'all can think of that I couldn't? Yes.
What happens to the barbecue in the case of bad weather?
Excellent question. Mary.
I'm sorry, what?
Not you, other Mary.
Oh.
Sorry, Mary Petrana.
I don't know, it's a good question.
We bring umbrellas.
Depending on how many people there are.
Yeah, okay, so
Nicole is saying, depending on how many people there are, we can come inside, which would probably mean then the program wouldn't happen if it's messy. So we'll punch.
And is there a list of things we should bring?
There is not a list, but the board is supplying, we're supplying the burgers and brats, soda, water, ice, and the, paper plates, napkins kind of stuff. So really just dishes to pass.
Okay.
And we may do beer and hard cider kind of stuff.
Do we need to bring the yard to done?
Not that I know of. I believe she's just doing a demonstration.
Do you have grills there?
No, I'm gonna grill burgers and brats ahead of time and just put it in a crock pot.
Okay, because I saw in the newsletter you were requesting help grilling, and I was gonna offer to help grill.
Thanks. I was gonna do that. I thought that there were still grills at parks, but there are not. And I don't have a car. I don't have a car that's big enough to take my grill anywhere. And it just seemed like too much work to do, and it just seemed simpler if I just grilled it at home and then put it in a crock pot and we'll bring it back.
Do you need help doing that? I could help you.
Sure. I will take your name and
We'll talk after.
Okay.
Thank
Sure,
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other old business that needs brought up before we move on to the election? Because that's the only thing I've got for new business tonight. All right, moving on. New business. The only thing I have on my agenda is the election. So, Mary, come on up.
So up for nominations tonight are President Lauren Hackerat, Vice President Jenna Horde, Secretary Colleen Frericks, Treasurer Angie Erbs, website Karen Ubelacker and Cheryl Knapp, programs Mary Vetrano, membership Mary Sherwood and Pat Klappa, State Fair Karen Lemmer, Charity, Nicole Anderson and Lisa Luciak. Newsletter, Erica Strebel. Publicity, Karen Ubelacker. Education is open. If there's somebody that wants to throw their hat in the ring tonight, feel free. Events, Kelly Joyson, and nomination, Lisa Luciak. So all in favor, say aye. What?
I move that we approve the slate of officers as read.
Second.
Thank you.
Molly and Pat.
I would like all of them to stand up so we have names.
To their faces.
Faces to the names.
Many of us are the same. So Colleen is not here tonight. She is ill, but
And what position is she going to?
secretary. She's the gal that's been taking notes for us. So, this is Jenna,
Hi, I'm Jenna,
candidate
current vice president. Up to continue.
Mary Vetrano.
for programs. Angie is also not here tonight. She had some family stuff come up, so you'll not be able to see her either, but she has been to a few meetings before, so you may remember her. Sorry, Kelly.
Oh, and I'm Kelly. I recently started doing events.
I'm Mary Sherwood. Pat Klappa is back there. Karen Lemmer is not here. Lisa Luciak is not here. Nicole Anderson. Okay. Erica Strabel. Karen Ubelacker.
Also not here.
Okay. Kelly stood up, and like I said, Lisa Luciak's not here. So
Lots of health stuff today. So sorry about the empty faces, but they are usually very involved. All right. So now we need to, we have a motion and a second to approve the slate of officers.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And opposed?
Okay.
Congratulations.
Welcome and congratulations to
Thank you, Mary.
And thank you to all of you who are doing such fine work.
We do our best. And extra thank you to Mary, because Mary was not expecting to have to do that tonight. All right, is there any new business that we want to bring up before it is time to close our business meeting?
Oh, I forgot.
Yes, Kelly.
For the Sheep and Wool Festival, the walk-in knit, if anybody's interested and you're interested in getting that team together for the walk-in knit, it's you just knit and walk and.
It's a relay.
Yeah.
Okay, will that be in the newsletter too?
Yeah, well, I'll have.
Yeah.
And the question about that, is are you gonna have all the detail about?
The walk-in knit?
Yeah, day,
Yeah.
time, and.
I think that we'll put it in the newsletter, and that way y'all can have a little more informed opinion of whether you want to do that. Alright. Anything else that I'm missing and or forgetting? Excellent. Can I have a motion to bring our meeting to a close?
Erica moves to adjourn.
Who did?
Erica.
Trouble.
Thank you, Erica. And can I have a second?
Rosemary Muller.
Thank you, Rosemary. All in favor? Huzzah! We're done. Have a great night, everyone.